In a moment of need, every second counts. So first responders, delivery drivers, and visitors can find your home fast, even in the dark. This is about more than just a number. It's about safety, visibility, and peace of mind. We created a house number that is not only a beacon of safety, but also a work of art. Crafted from durable stainless steel and waterproof acrylic, with efficient, low-voltage LED backlighting, it's uniquely yours. Choose from 6 sizes, 4 fonts, and 6 colors, and match your home's mood with bright, neutral, or warm white halo lighting. Add dusk to dawn, dimming and timing controls for complete command.
Every order includes free worldwide shipping, plus a 2-year warranty on lighted numbers and all powering accessories.
This is the ultimate home upgrade. A perfect blend of style, quality, and function.
Buy yours today.
Welcome to the Turnpike Sports Spotlight. Dave Weishottle with you. The gaming industry is so interesting to me because it's always changing with new issues constantly popping up. And one of the best places that allows the gaming industry to keep up with the constant changes in this business is VIXIO Regulatory Intelligence. They have released incredibly important reports and just announced the release of a next-generation workspace platform. And to tell us all about it, on the line we have returning guest James Kilsby, Chief Gambling Compliance and Regulation Analyst from VIXIO. James, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
When it comes to guiding the gaming industry in this country and around the world, VIXIO is so important. And, you know, this is me speaking as a gaming lawyer. VIXIO provides incredibly important information for the gaming industry. But remind the people out there who aren't part of the gaming industry, what is VIXIO and what is its role in the gaming industry?
So VIXIO is a RegTech and regulatory intelligence platform, and we help any of those within the industry that have their work depends on compliance and regulation. So that's more than just within legal and compliance. That's sort of strategy, government affairs, business development, and beyond. We help them to navigate both changing regulations as regulators and governments introduce new regulations. We track them from whether first announced or proposed to how they're implemented, and then we map out what's changing where, how. We help them anticipate future regulatory change trends by looking over the horizon at what might be coming next. And we also have a series of consolidated reports, so our users don't have to spend hours or days or weeks or whatever it is researching regulations across the global gaming industry, which are, as you know, very, very different state to state, let alone country to country. They can come all in one place and they can clearly understand what's legal where, what are the specific rules that apply to different gambling products in different jurisdictions all over the world. So yeah, I've been going now for actually edging up towards 20 years, touching on our 19th birthday next year.
Wow.
And I'm very, very grateful for the support of the industry as we continue to do it. And I can say from being around most of that time, regulatory change has not settled down within the industry at large over that period of time. If anything, there's probably more going on today as we head into 2026 than at any other point in those 19 years. So a fascinating space to be involved in.
Now, speaking of milestones, I just got the press release that VIXIO has obtained an ISO 27001 certification for information security management. So what's that mean for VIXIO, and what does it mean for the clients that you serve in the gaming industry?
Yeah, so it's an ISO certification is obviously the gold standard when it comes to information security, and that's become more important to VIXIO and to our clients because the way that we're evolving as a RegTech service is to a degree beyond just VIXIO publishing its own analysis and consolidating information and chopping it up in clever ways and disseminating it through our platform. We are moving towards higher degree of interactivity and new products and solutions that will enable our clients to interact with the intelligence and the requirements that we publish, to share and forward that with their own teams, and to compare requirements against their own policies, for example. So it's important because this is obviously shows that Vixio works at the highest level from an information security point in general, but certainly so for our clients as they become more embedded in working within the Vixio platform, rather than sort of using our information and bringing it into theirs. Is even more important for us to be committed to that, so that they know that that interactivity and what they input themselves from their own perspective against the Vixio information, that's completely protected to the highest international certification level.
You mentioned the reports Vixio releases, and they are just fantastic. Anyone who works in this industry should be indebted to Vixio because of the information you provide. The one that struck me, I mean, it was a couple months ago. It was the US Online Outlook for summer of 2025, and you had some figures on online sports betting, which were just incredible. I mean, when talking about the revenue that's generated from online sports betting in this country, what is the figure that's being forecast for this year? And what does Vixio see the number becoming in a couple of years?
Yeah, so we routinely update and adjust our forecasts for the US and for other markets based on reported data, right? So as growth shrinks, accelerates, or otherwise, to the extent that sort of deviates from what we're expecting, we adjust our forecasts. And then obviously, legislative developments are pivotal to forecasting size of the US market. So as the prospects of legalization in X state for iGaming or sports betting gets better or worse, we also adjust our forecasts on that basis too. So yeah, we keep our market forecast for the US very, very fluid and on constant review. And we've adjusted them more recently in the summer. And for sports betting, mobile sports betting, we are forecasting for GGR, so gross revenue, to reach 17.8 billion this year, in 2025, and then continue to grow to reach 28.5 billion by 2029. So by the end of the decade, of the online sports betting in the market in the US that we expect will be worth 28.5 billion. There's upside potential if we saw adoption in sort of a larger number of states that we're expecting. So, for example, we're not been factored into that forecast California or Georgia or Texas. It requires laws to be passed in those states. So there is some upside potential. And then if you add in iGaming, which, as you know, is a much more limited footprint in terms of legal states, but we think total online gambling revenue, so OSB, online sports betting plus iGaming, we're forecasting that to be worth 28.7 billion across both verticals this year, and then get up to 45.5 billion by 2029. Again, with potential upside on the iGaming front, but I think we're anticipating pretty modest or even no adoption by other states over the next few years. So you're talking about in the aggregate, right? So US as a whole, by far the largest online gambling market, regulated online gambling market globally, and from doing this for kind of longer than I care to admit, but these forecasts are so much greater than I think we'd ever imagined at the time of the sort of 2018 Supreme Court ruling, which, needless to say, is the kind of pivotal moment in the development of online gambling in the US. The market is way bigger than we'd ever anticipated it, ever could have anticipated it to be at that point in time.
These numbers are incredible. Again, as you said, I would have never thought it achieved these numbers when PASPA was repealed. And I'm very curious about growth. I mean, when taking into consideration the growth of sports betting and the idea that, look, we only had one state legalizing sports betting this year, and that's Missouri. I mean, where is that growth coming from? Is there more? Certainly, if Texas or California allow sports betting, then those numbers will be astronomical. Is that where we're seeing? You think you're seeing the growth? I mean, I'm just curious about.
No, not really. No,
Mhm.
we're forecasting for kind of ongoing steady market growth across the board when it comes to sports betting. The sort of rate of growth obviously depends on the relative maturity of the market. So, I mean, Missouri went live last week, or
December
that's
1st.
obviously gonna grow at a faster clip in its first year, second year, third year than we anticipate New Jersey to grow. But the story of the US market is of continued growth that we see today. Some of that is sort of margin driven, right? So handle growth may be steadying off, but operators are able to earn more gross revenue through their margins. That's something that the industry at large, but especially so DraftKings, FanDuel have been very successful at doing over the last few years. So the different factors in that, but we're not in those forecasts I shared with you. As I say, they don't include a Georgia and a California and a Texas. The Georgia's, I think, probably a stronger possibility to happen in the next few years than the other two. But no, this growth is anticipated, kind of despite the very material slowdown in legalization that we've seen. As you know, right? Missouri was the most recent cab off the rank, and there isn't another cab waiting around the corner that's coming that we can definitely foresee in 2026. The slowdown is the map is quite well drawn out at this point in time.
Many states right now are looking at changing the tax rate for sports betting operators. And I'm just curious, how do you think that will affect the rate of growth for a sports betting industry? Or is there just way too much money being made and the tax rate will really have little or no effect on growth? I mean, I remember when New York was going to start their mobile sports betting and they were talking about 51% tax rates, and they said, oh, no one's going to come there, and everyone's coming there and they're making money. So
you're exactly right. And I think New York is an incredibly important case study on this subject. So if I recall correctly, when it was Governor Cuomo at the time first proposed sports betting, and actually wasn't written into the legislation, but the suggestions were for a 50% tax, and I think there was forecasting to achieve 500 million in state revenue, so $1 billion market. And I think most conventional wisdom at that time in the industry was, well, the 50% tax is going to undercut your ability to get to that $1 billion in revenue, so it's not going to happen. And lo and behold, the market surpassed 2 billion last year, and we expect to pass 2.5 billion this year. So again, that's an example of how the numbers are very, very big. And New York has performed remarkably despite that tax rate. In terms of the impact of other states, clearly that is one of the defining policy trends and issues of 2025 has been states increasing their taxes on sports betting. I think it's fair to say most in Maryland, New Jersey, Louisiana, they've been much more incremental. So we're talking about states going from roughly 15% tax rate to 20% tax rate. Clearly that impacts the operators, but I think operators are able largely to absorb that, and don't anticipate that alone would affect the growth rate in the markets. Illinois is a bit more of an interesting one. As you know, there's the new per wager tax of 25 cents or 50 cents on the value of every bet that the Illinois legislature approved as part of its budget this year. That is much more of an interesting one to watch.
Yeah,
I think in terms of the impact on the bettor and then ultimately on the performances. How does that impact the market?
Yeah,
most operators are passing that on as a in some way or other, but DraftKings and FanDuel passing that on as a fee to the consumer, so the consumer pays the tax. So far, it's very, 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 very early days in terms of data we've seen. 1 month, given football season is sort of the starting point for where you see these trends, hasn't created in by any stretch of the imagination the market. Market's still growing, but so Illinois is much more one to watch.
Yeah,
than the other states.
I was gonna ask about Illinois because it's one of those things that just surprise a lot of people what they're doing, but it's one of those things where look, I've talked to a lot of politicians and a lot of people who make policy, and they watch what other states do. So could Illinois possibly become a blueprint for other states? Certainly. A lot of legislators are saying, you know what, we should have charged more taxes when we allowed sports betting. Maybe this is a way now we can do it. Is Illinois one of those states to watch that could affect other states' policy?
It's possible. I wouldn't necessarily expect that. I think the general trend is states are looking at in some way or other increasing the tax rate for sports betting. Whether they will look to Illinois and a per wager tax model, I really don't know. I don't know. Illinois is unique, and has been unique in terms of how it's moved on tax, even before this per wager tax. So we'll see. I don't think it's by no means a guarantee, and I think the fact as well that the operators are passing on the tax to the player maybe a bit of a disincentive for other states to follow that, but we'll see. I think one of the things we do that is just about observable from very early data in Illinois is this encourages players to bet more, not necessarily place more bets, but to bet in larger amounts, right? And I can totally see the logic in that. If you're having to pay a 50-cent fee for every bet, well, you might as well make a $50 bet instead of a $30 bet, or a $10 bet instead of a $5 bet. The sort of perception is if you're paying the same fee, no matter the level of your wager. Plus, operators are some of it introducing minimum bet amounts on a kind of per bet basis. It's encouraging bettors to bet more. So that might lead to a bit more volatility in the market, and also again some states, some policymakers might be discouraged by that. So we'll see. But Illinois for various reasons is unique, and I say the Louisiana, Maryland, New Jersey, similar-ish changes for similar motivations. Whereas Illinois, different case altogether.
One of the big issues out there for everyone in the gaming industry is what's going on with the prediction markets. I mean, federal judges in New Jersey and Nevada granted injunctions barring state regulators from taking any enforcement actions against Kalshi. And I know the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the Gaming Control Board Executive Director Kevin O'Toole sent a letter to the state's representatives in the Senate and the House saying, you know what, prediction markets are a significant threat to the state's gaming marketplace, which is an interesting language he used. What is the state of the prediction markets in this country? And in 2026, will states need to legislate and pass regulations regarding these markets? I mean, right now, when it comes to regulation, no one really has a clear answer to what's going on with regard to these platforms. Where does Vixio see this issue headed?
It's the number one issue in the industry. The dominant theme, even above taxes for 2025. I suspect that'll absolutely be the case in 2026 as well. So plenty of things to unpack there. From sort of summarize the landscape, the betting operators, the gaming operators, have evolved in their thinking around prediction landscapes over prediction markets over 2025. We now have FanDuel. Fanatics has launched its prediction market platform. FanDuel and DraftKings will do so in short order. So to the extent that prediction markets are a threat to the regulated sports betting industry as we understood it prior to this year, some are embracing this as an opportunity and embracing it as an opportunity to offer a product in, I mean, I just mentioned Georgia and California and Texas, but in those states that haven't legalized sports wagering yet, there is another route to market now through prediction market exchange offering betting on sports. So that's been an evolution of thinking of some of sorts in the industry over the course of this year. Where we are from a kind of legality point of view is absolutely states pretty much across the board are opposed to prediction markets based on sports and are holding their ground and pushing back against sports event contracts. There must be at least a half dozen states, probably slightly more than that now, that have where there's active litigation in federal courts. Yeah, you mentioned New Jersey, Nevada, but also Maryland and Connecticut and Massachusetts, and involves sort of slightly different interest groups in California and Wisconsin. That litigation is going to continue. I suspect pendulum will swing a little bit back and forth around sort of central questions of whether sports events contracts are permissible, which there's a couple of sub questions I think that determine that. And I think our expectation in Vixio is this is probably heading to the US Supreme Court to issue a ruling, and it seems highly unlikely that things would play out quick enough that we get to an outcome of that ruling in 2026. Well, 2027 or later. So I think the current situation is going to play out in different ways through different court circuits, but we're going to see big expansion of sports event prediction markets continue in 2026.
Let me ask you, do you see a scenario in the future where the federal government will have to get involved with the regulation of prediction markets? I mean, do you think Congress will enact laws or regulations with regard to prediction markets? Because right now there seems to be a clash of what's happening out there.
You asked as well about, do we anticipate states to legislate for this? I would anticipate that we'll see state legislation targeting prediction markets and specifically sports prediction markets, although not exclusively. There's already a bill in New York, but I think we'll see plenty more that in 2026. I don't see how it makes a difference. The core argument that the Kilsby and the Crypto.com and the prediction markets makes is the Commodity Exchange Act and their authorization under the CFTC from federal level preempts state law. So I don't see what difference it will make if states pass new laws and restrictions specifically around prediction market offerings. There may be other avenues they could pursue. I don't see that would change, and the argument would remain the same, that federal law preempts state law. So you're kind of back to where you are in the first place, and that's a central question that needs to be resolved in court. Yeah. Whether Congress would act, hard to sort of say that. Hard to anticipate that with any real confidence in 2026 as things stand. But there are sharp dividing lines now between the gaming industry at large. So traditional casino operators in the AGA very much opposed to sports event prediction markets. Tribal gaming interests, maybe even more so, are opposed to sports event contracts, and will fight their ground on that. Then you obviously, though, have very now well capitalized and powerful companies in and of their own right that participate in the market, Robinhood and others, let alone the Kilsby's and the Cryptos.coms. So we have two powerful vested interest groups on totally opposite sides of an issue. More often than not, you have a kind of a inertia that makes passing any federal legislation very different. I kind of think the thing to watch out for in 2026 on this specific front is less about sports event contracts than political trades and political event betting on prediction markets. Obviously, that happened in the run-up to the 2024 presidential election, where I think it's fair to say Kilsby came to real prominence at that point in time. Yeah. But that's going to be nothing like what we see in 2026 heading into the congressional midterms and gubernatorial elections, where political event betting via prediction markets is going to be way, way more in the face of federal and state lawmakers than it ever was before. So we'll kind of see how lawmakers react to that for the first time, and whether that gives sort of a reason and a motivation to pass new legislation. But no, I think it will be the federal court system that's ultimately determines the long-term landscape, and I'll probably anticipate federal legislation to respond to whatever happens at say a Supreme Court or like appellate level court rulings that prompt the response, rather than proactive legislation coming in the near term.
Now, another big issue that the states are going to have to deal with this year are sweepstakes casinos. I mean, a lot of cease and desist letters have been sending out. A lot of states are starting to draft legislation to make them illegal. Where do you see that issue headed in the near future? Because certainly cease and desist letters seem to be having some effect. A lot of are dropping out. But does more need to be done from the states to deal with this issue?
Yeah, I think I think at industry conferences and in the industry at large, there's been a little bit of a tendency to bucket sweeps and prediction markets together as a sort of new emerging vertical that is a threat or opportunity, depending on your perspective, compared to the regulated sports betting or regulated iGaming. But from a policy point of view, they're totally different. And we just said about how state legislation on prediction markets wouldn't move the needle, but state enforcement action and particularly state legislation absolutely is moving the needle for sweepstakes. Whether sweepstakes are permissible, by and large, hinges on state law definitions of gambling and permitted sweepstakes, etc. So yeah, you're seeing the states I think it's 5 states this year, California and New York being the big ones, but then also New Jersey, Connecticut, Montana, all passed legislation to prohibit sweepstakes operations this year. And then it must be a dozen or so states taking cease and desist actions based on the pre-existing state law, which are proven to be successful. So I guess the story with sweepstakes is the map is shrinking, and the map has shrunk very materially for sweeps operators in 2025. And the question for 2026 is, does that map continue to shrink, and do we see more state legislation and more enforcement cease and desist efforts that so take a few more states off the board? I think probably is the answer to that. Mm-hmm. Or do we come to look back at 2025 as like the high watermark of activity when it comes to sweeps? And I guess the sort of analogy there, if I recall, the first round of DraftKings and FanDuel coming to prominence in the US market with DFS, a dozen or so states, I guess. New York, again, I think was the most prominent, took action against them.
Yeah.
And then that then triggered a state legislative response to legalize fantasy sports in 20 or so states. But then you had roughly half the country where DraftKings and FanDuel are offering their fantasy sports, their DFS products, same way today that they were prior to that. So you didn't see 50 states take action against DFS. And maybe that's the case with sweeps as well, where the map is shrinking and the map may continue to shrink next year, but do you still end up with a addressable market of, I don't know, 20, 25, whatever states for sweeps operators? That's the question really is was this year the high water mark, or just the beginning, the beginning and the end for the sweepstakes market?
Let me ask you about legal regulated online casinos. I mean, they make a lot of money for a handful of states that allow them, but there's still a lot of opposition to them around the United States. And I guess the main issue in opposition against online casinos is the cannibalization issue. I mean, especially in Florida and New York, that's a huge issue. Do you think in the coming year or coming years we're going to see more states allow online casinos, or is that cannibalization issue just too difficult to overcome? And by the way, New Jersey's not helping the matter either. I think we had this last month, online casinos made more revenue than brick and mortar casinos. So you have statistics out there like that. It really doesn't help the fact that you want to expand online casinos throughout the U.S.
No, it's a very curious case, iGaming in the US market, where to some degree the iGaming industry has been a victim of its own success. The revenue numbers that continue to be reported, particularly so in Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, are astronomical. Growth is continuing, and then even at sort of the next rung down, Connecticut, West Virginia, these have become very sizable online casino markets in their own right, albeit not at the same scale as the big three. And I think it's fair to say that the success of those states has crystallized the opposition more than it's sort of motivated more states to follow. The cannibalization arguments, and there's that's a highly charged issue, where opponents will claim X and opponents of the industry will claim Y, and I think in high likelihood the truth is probably somewhere in the middle of X and Y. And it's also going to be very state specific and operator specific what the actual impact is, etc., etc. So that won't go into that discussion point now. But we are seeing greater opposition and more organized opposition to iGaming in the US, 2025 heading into 2026. Probably at any point that we've had since this was a kind of pet issue for Sheldon Adelson and the coalition with one member much more powerful than the others, trying to pursue a total federal ban, and that was 10 or so years ago. So iGaming has got much harder to achieve and much harder to pass, in large part because of cannibalization. And many of the casino operators the gaming operators that are opposed to iGaming, they're not a Caesars or an MGM in terms of their scale and brand recognition, but it's often a local hero in each of the states, or an operator that has a significant presence in a given state. So you think of Cordish in Maryland, that operated the live casino near Baltimore, Jack Entertainment in Ohio, Churchill Downs has big presence in Virginia or New Hampshire. You sort of look at the states, and there's also the VGT, video gaming terminal operators in Illinois. You start to sort of in almost every state you can identify a very powerful incumbent opponent to iGaming for the reasons we talked about. So that's one reason why it's get harder to achieve. There's probably a few others. A little bit is I don't think in many international countries that legalize and regulate online gambling as a whole, the majority of them, although by no means all of them, they've tended to regulate sports betting and iGaming concurrently, done it together. The perfectly logical, they were starting from a different place in the US so it's a bit unfair to kind of compare apples to apples, but so that's the trend, is normally iGaming and sports betting are legalized together at the same time. Had that in Michigan. I'm struggling to think of, and in Pennsylvania actually, I'm struggling to think of where that's been the case otherwise in the US. And obviously most states have gone with sports betting and mobile sports betting first, and would have to come back for iGaming. So what you've seen is some of the negativity and negative feeling around sports betting, particularly when it comes to like advertising saturation, to the extent that some lawmakers may have mixed feelings about whether they made the right decision, probably because of the amount of advertising that came following legalization of sports betting. That's not helpful for coming back later and saying, can you legalize iGaming now? Now's the time for iGaming. And I say that in some states is also a headwind, which hasn't really been in place in many international markets, or in Ontario, for example, because states have authorized iGaming and mobile sports betting at the same. Countries have regulated them at the same time.
We are now in the big sports betting time of the year. I know a lot of states are breaking state handle records, so it's absolutely incredible. And at the top of the betting list is the NFL. What were the numbers that were projected for the NFL? And do you think possibly down the road the prediction markets could affect these numbers, the betting numbers for the NFL? Or do you think the operators are in the future just going to morph into these prediction market operators?
Good question. If 2025 taught us anything, it's that predicting the future of the gaming and sports betting industry is harder than we thought it was. And no one really saw sports prediction markets coming until roughly 12 or so months ago. So Vixio forecasted for total handle on the NFL season this year, on the NFL this season, to be about $35 billion. So that's the amount bet on NFL, which is it's a very, very large number.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't include, that is regulated sportsbook handle projected in those states that have legalized sports wagering. Doesn't include additional volumes bet or traded on prediction market platforms such as Kilsby, particularly saying, the likes of the Californias and etc., where there is no regulated sports betting operations. So yeah, that number is much bigger on the basis that you have prediction markets available now in those states. It's very, very early days indeed. We're not seeing so far a discernible impact from prediction markets on regulated sports betting markets. FanDuel and DraftKings and other sports books are continuing to grow in those states where they operate, despite sort of nascent competition from a Kalshi and 50 state businesses. So we're not seeing a negative impact from prediction markets on sports betting, regulated sports betting platforms. And I know that the commentary from Jason Robbins and from Peter Jackson, the CEOs of Flutter and DraftKings, commentary continues to be that they don't expect prediction market to compete with a fixed odds betting product, a full sportsbook product, and they don't see that as a sort of competitive threat where those two products come up against each other. So I think from a sports perspective, the biggest opportunity, biggest sort of driver of growth for prediction markets for sports, presumably in states that don't have legal sports betting. So it's coming from a California and a Texas and a Georgia, etc., much more so than it is from a New York and a New Jersey.
There's some more exciting news coming out of Vixio, and that is you released your next generation workspace platform. Now I know some months back you came on to talk about Workspace when it was first released. Vixio just enhanced this already popular tool in the gaming industry. First off, what is Workspace, and what does this tool do to help operators in the gaming industry?
Yeah, this kind of comes back to well, we start off with the ISO certification, really, and this is the interactivity and the embedding of Vixio regulatory content into sort of operators and others' workflow being brought to life. So Workspace, it allows our users to have a customized alert of regulatory changes and to triage or action those regulatory changes as they see them, either by dismissing them or by creating tasks against them that they can then disseminate with their teams, with their colleagues, to take action against. So that's one part of it, is regulatory change management in real time, where as a regulation changed or the consultation begins, etc., Workspace means that our users don't just read about them on our platform and then copy and paste them or take them away. They can action them directly in the platform and follow a trail of how their companies need to respond to them. So that's one thing. The other side is within Workspace, our clients can build their own tasks and manage them through to completion and see an audit trail of actions that they're taking against regulatory changes. And then thirdly, we'll be launching within the next few days a further iteration of this, which means that clients can build their own library of regulatory requirements that apply specifically to their companies, against sort of clearly marked against the actual language of laws, regulations that apply. So what we allow our users to do is to visualize the laws and regulations, bring in the right parts that apply to their businesses, establish their own requirements and tie them back to the regulations that apply, and then disseminate them within their organizations, doing that all within the platform. And then as regulations change, they'll see an alert that regulation X has changed. So regulation Y, requirement Y that you've set needs to be reviewed. So it's what it's really doing is taking the highly regulated and volatile regulation that applies to the gambling industry that Vixio sort of mapped and carefully chronicled over the years, but allowing our users to really action against that within our platform.
I have to tell you, as someone who works in the industry and is in constant contact with gaming operators, I can't stress enough how important compliance is. I mean, compliance is basically life or death for gaming operators. Yeah. And I can tell you, everyone listening out there, that every state has their own rules and regulations that operators have to be compliant with. In a world where there's prediction markets, sweepstakes casinos, some states are issuing bet limits when it comes to micro markets in baseball, and rules are different across different jurisdictions. But give us a sense how Workspace presents the information to gaming operators who use this tool.
So there's a couple of things I'll touch upon one of them, right? As you've very, very aptly described, the sort of overall body of regulations that apply to the gambling industry are just vast.
It's insane. Yeah.
It's so many different laws, so many regulations, and then different layers, and you drill down into guidelines and technical standards. It's really quite overwhelming. And there's so, I don't say this in a judgmental way, but there's a lot of inefficiency in that. Two different laws apply to what's seemingly the same thing in a given state, and you may have separate regulators for horse racing versus lotteries versus casinos versus whatever else. So there is a lot of a morass really of regulations that apply. One thing that Workspace helps with is allowing each of our users to set themselves a customized feed, so they can just receive in a queue of things to action regulations that come from the sectors or the jurisdictions or the specific regulators or the specific topics that they need, so that they're not, like feeling in the dark for they're trying to find the right regulation that applies from hundreds of regulations. They can have their own sort of crafted and customized feed based on the states that they're in, states that they're watching, key topics that they're personally responsible for, and so that's a way of bringing it to life, is allowing sort of that out of that vast body of regulation, every company and every individual in the company will have their own sort of priority score for the states and the laws and the regs and the specific things that matter to them. So that's one of the things that we can bring to life, is the curation and sort of sharing of those the regulations that matter.
Just when I thought you couldn't make Workspace any better, you actually made it better. It's absolutely incredible. So what's next for Vixio? Do you have anything coming out in the next couple of months or next year that people should be on the lookout for?
So prediction markets absolutely is a top priority. We will be early in the new year coming up with a special report on the outlook for prediction markets. Our view around that is the US is absolutely the epicenter of prediction markets today, but we think it's becoming more important globally as well. So taking a global view to that topic, that's one thing that's happening. I think I've joined previously. We've expanded our technical compliance offering to cover a full range of that vast body of regulation that I just described. And we're ramping up Workspace. So lots going on in terms of Vixio's own products and solutions. And from an industry point of view, aside from prediction markets, we're very closely monitoring sort of evolution of new markets globally. The UAE is a market that has a lot of interest, both for land-based and online gambling operators and suppliers. And then next year, I think you'll see markets that we're focusing in on is Finland and Ireland in Europe, New Zealand internationally, plus Alberta, a bit closer to home in Canada. So lots of regulatory changes to monitor apps and analyze in the right way, but also lots of product enhancements at Vixio as well.
James, we're running out of time, but can you give out a website for Vixio so people can find out more about it and read all the incredible reports that Vixio publishes, and also find out about the new Workspace platform that you recently released? And also, if you have any social media addresses you want to give out, please do so.
I sure can, yeah. So you should be able to find VIXIO Regulatory Intelligence on LinkedIn, VIXIO. But you can also visit VixioVixio.com. And at that website, you can learn more about our product, services, and solutions, but also I'll be able to download some samples of our reports and the analysis that we produce. So highly encourage you to visit Vixio.com.
James Kilsby, Chief Gambling Compliance and Regulation Analyst from VIXIO Regulatory Intelligence. Thank you so much for coming on and telling us all about VIXIO's incredible work for the gaming industry, as well as updating us on the Workspace platform. When it comes to compliance, Vixio is such an important resource and has some of the greatest tools for the gaming industry. So please come back on and keep us updated about what Vixio is doing for the gaming industry, because it is always important. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. No, always a pleasure.
That'll do it for us this week. We'll see you next time on The Turnpike.